So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me on the talk today. So it's very much just a talk. I got asked to give an account of a project I've been working on, which kind of merges two quite strong passions of mine around cycling and kind of academia. So I'm just going to take you a bit through that journey, how that came about, where it started, where we're up to now, and then kind of where we're going with that in the future. And hopefully this will be helpful to for some of you to kind of hear that journey and process really. So yeah, kind of a bit of an overview for the next little while for my talk is just to kind of set the scene a little bit. So talk about kind of my background and kind of why this is of interest to me, where I then started in kind of academia, kind of working on projects and with Move More, and where that kind of this project eventually kind of came from, with the Sheffield kind of all-wheel bike park. So talking about that kind of project journey, the kind of aims and objectives there as well. And then for those of you who don't know, probably scratching your head a little bit, what a pump track or kind of is within cycling. So my background, I did an undergrad and an MSc in sport and exercise psychology at Northumbria. I then carried that on to a PhD at behavioural health psychology, concentrating on exercise behaviour. And I'm also a keen cyclist, keen mountain biker, and I run my own business as well called A-Line Mountain Bike Coaching. And this talk, I guess, is just really merging those two worlds. And just to put it into a bit of a broader context as well, a bit of a kind of self-reflection really. Cycling has enabled me to live a very active life without the kind of the need for a lot of motivation really. So even when the weather's really bad outside, there's a lot of rain coming down, there's kind of mud everywhere, I still got a keen interest in going out on my bike. And I think a lot of that is because cycling is inherently enjoyable to myself, and it's become kind of part of who I am really. And to broaden it out a little bit, the kind of research and the literature also kind of supports this idea that as someone kind of continues or gets involved in a behaviour and that becomes perhaps part of their identity, or it becomes a habit, the need for motivation can reduce slightly as well. So a lot of my work revolves around wanting to support people to live healthier, happier lives, and for physical activity to be something that they do and not something that they kind of have to do, if you see what I mean. And so this project began in 2016, post-PhD, started working on the Move More programme, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but which is essentially Sheffield's physical activity plan. I won't go into too much detail, but Move More essentially kind of focus on a kind of a whole systems approach to physical activity, where it kind of helps to connect people and organisations across the city in physical activity, working in kind of 5 or 6 kind of key areas. So one of those obviously been, or many been around active schools, active environments, activities medicine, sports group, workplaces, and kind of so on. Within each of those groups, there's then kind of interventions led to help promote physical activity and help people to live a more active life. Just very broadly speaking, Move More is kind of grounded in 2 kind of main theories: the social ecological model, which kind of explains that we exist within a physical, social, and political environment, and that kind of helps and kind of shapes our behaviour to some degree. But also the kind of self-determination theory, which kind of explains that we move from amotivation to being highly intrinsically motivated, and that we can influence that through competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Within, as I mentioned, I do a lot of work within the kind of schools area of the Move More plan. And within this kind of area, there's a lot of talk around children's foundation movement skills, of which commonly speaking about is walking or running, swimming, and kind of learning to ride a bike. And these very much act as the sort of building blocks for an active adult. And schools often concentrate and spend a lot of time with a focus on swimming, but cycling, although it does get some limelight, it's probably not up there to the same degree as kind of swimming is pushed. But what's really interesting about cycling, or what I find really interesting about it, is that it's a really important foundation skill in that it can be used for recreation, leisure time, it can be used for family time, and it's also important it can be used for commuting or transport. So thinking about active adults, if we build children's confidence and ability in cycling, we're much more likely to create kind of active adults for commuting or transport or recreational values in the future. So bringing that kind of passion into that wider context then, I very much kind of identified kind of an opportunity when I mean, I'm a big, that's me on the right there, at a track in Edinburgh. And I've ridden kind of skate parks, pump tracks for pretty much all my life. And I find that a really great facility that utilize a lot of kind of that intrinsic motivation. Sort of, there's no structured activity telling me I've got to go there or anything like that. I just kind of find myself at these places and kind of really enjoy them. Something I really enjoy, especially since I've been in my kind of academic role, I really noticed the kind of demographic of people at these places. And one thing that always amazes me is you get people of all different ages, shapes, genders, sizes, backgrounds, you know. It doesn't, you know, they're very all-encompassing and kind of, they don't have many kind of barriers in that sense. But in order to get into this or many cycling avenues, the physical environment often shapes a lot of the opportunities that we have in cycling. So I've kind of identified that kind of need to want to develop those opportunities within the physical facilities kind of area. And alongside that, I think kind of cycling inherently, speak to most kids, you know, there's a lot of enjoyment in there, and if you can build in some self-efficacy, so some confidence in cycling, if the behavior is repeated enough, then hopefully they can start to form that self-identity and kind of habit, as I did, and hopefully live a healthy kind of active life in the future. And this, I believe, encompasses much of kind of Move More's mantra as well. So just a little bit about pump tracks then. So what are they? This is a kind of a picture of one. It's a series of large bumps, jumps and corners designed so that you have to pump your bike or not pedal. And the real thing that I kind of like about them is that they're very accessible. They're great for beginners all the way up to elite, and they can really build on foundation skills for other areas of cycling, such as mountain biking or kind of BMX or kind of whatever other disciplines you'd like to get into. And I'm just going to stop sharing this screen, and then I'm going to share another screen. Hopefully this will work. We practiced it and it did work then. And then I'm just going to show a quick video. Hopefully people can see. So this is what a typical pump track may look like. Just a little interview in a moment. I'm just going to leave it playing until then. So I'll just go back to my other screen. Where is it? So hopefully you could see from that video, hopefully everyone could hear the interview at the end there, but Ryan kind of highlighted a few kind of key aspects that I think pump tracks and this sort of facility really facilitate within local communities, and that, you know, he highlighted that they're kind of all ability. So I don't think they're quite all ability, but they really hit a huge proportion of that kind of scope. They're kind of all weather. So again, they're reducing barriers to accessibility. And they're also zero maintenance, or as close as you can get to that with these new sort of asphalt kind of pump tracks, which really helps in the sustainability. So already inherent in this sort of facility, you've got you're kind of breaking down barriers to being physically active already. So that's kind of the idea. That's kind of what I'd like, or what I kind of set out to kind of wanting to accomplish, is to have that sort of facility built here in Sheffield. It's something that hasn't which we currently don't really have, or we do have, but they're kind of generally much lower quality. And I think that the high quality is kind of really, really key. And then also, kind of being in the academic side of things, there's not a lot of literature around these. So I really wanted to develop a kind of bit of a research program based around creating the evidence base for this sort of facility, and kind of programs that can orientate around it. So started speaking to contractors, finding out how much does this sort of thing cost. I then started speaking to the local council, finding out if there's any appetite for this sort of thing in Sheffield. You know, is it feasible? And essentially, we found out that it was in many regards. So started searching for potential funders. The council were kind of happy with supporting this sort of idea. I started speaking to other councils who had already kind of funded potential or kind of similar sort of tracks or programs, and then also speaking to different charities that are involved in physical activity and sport. And we came across the charity Access Sport, who I believe are on the talk somewhere today as well, who fund such activities. And then between myself, Access Sport, and Sheffield City Council, we started doing a lot of prospective work to see, essentially, to drum up the kind of the programme and what that might look like, and if this could be achieved in Sheffield. Just to give you a bit of background to Access Sport charity, they're a London 2012 Olympic Games charity with a mission to transform the lives of young people from disadvantaged communities through sport and physical activity. And you can see from the website and speaking with them, their BMX program is one of their most successful programs. And it became very clear very quickly that there was a lot of synergy between Access Sport and Move More, which is obviously, as I mentioned before, Sheffield's physical activity strategy. So the project overview, so the aims of the project. So once we'd come to an agreement, we started drumming into a bit more of these details. So number one was we want to create a high quality facility that meets local needs. We want to create an activation plan to support that facility. So we work with national governing bodies, so British Cycling, local stakeholders, all in order to create a sustainable local offer. To do some outreach work, so we're concentrating on three main areas. I think there's enough evidence or anecdotal evidence in the past that we can't just build these things and expect people to come. We also need to encourage people to get into these or come to these facilities. So there's a specific focus on children and young people, women and girls, and an inclusion group as well through disability cycling. And then also I would like to evaluate that impact and have a research project as well. So how can we achieve those aims then? So we started to connect user groups and establish networks throughout the city that are involved or could be involved in the programme. We've established the need and public consultation. We've worked with Sheffield City Council on getting the facility built. It's not actually built yet, but it's in that kind of process, which is finding out is quite a long process. And started getting deliver some outreach in the local area as well, to help kind of create that excitement and engagement in the local community, so they can create some ownership over the project as well. They can perhaps design like bike logos or logos for the club, that sort of thing. And then obviously, so they're, I think, kind of areas that we've kind of we're on with. And then points 5, 6, and 7. So to actually create the facility, establish a club, and to evaluate it are still to come. So kind of what have we done so far then? So as I said, we've secured the agreement, which is great. So we're full steam ahead, really. We've created or completed a community consultation. We've got an outreach and activation plan, linking together the City Council, British Cycling, school networks, other significant stakeholders. And we've held some disability inclusion training at the AWRC earlier on in the year, which really helped to formulate an inclusion group in the city, which we kind of knew each other, but it wasn't necessarily a hardened group, and I think that's been a big success so far. And the project is aided in the creation of Sheffield's Recreation Cycle Facility Plan 2020 to 2025, which myself and shout out to John Dallow have been a big part of, who's kind of leading on the Parkwood Springs kind of side of cycling as well, or development. And then we've also put a Sheffield City Council planning application for the facility design, which went in a couple of weeks ago. So the community consultation, it was really important for obviously any kind of program like this, but inherent in this program as well, as we really wanted the community to take ownership in it, was that they gave us their kind of feedback in it. And we did this in a few different ways. We held a key kind of stakeholder workshop, which was led by Access Sport, where we discussed the project aims and local needs with key stakeholders, really, so local businesses and such. We then held an exhibition at Hillsborough Park, British Like and Let's Ride pop-up event. So in the park, in the proposed park for the facility itself, where we just spoke to local users of the park and found out their thoughts, feelings, and so forth, so on, of the facility. And then we completed a community survey, where an online survey where we shared through local networks, including like the Hillsborough Friends of group, through their Facebook page, through the library, and through local residents. And we got over 800 completed surveys. 90% of people were in favour of such a facility, 5% were indifferent, and 5% were not too keen. And as you can see from the word cloud on the right-hand side, a lot of the responses included a lot of encouraging words that kind of indicated we're on the right sort of track. So a lot of people talking about access, ability levels, activity levels, children, community, exercise, fun. Hillsborough obviously being a local area, kids, park, you know, some really good kind of feedback to start with. Just looking at some very, these are slightly out of date now, but we really want it to be as inclusive as possible, and that was something that came through the consultation. Again, was that we wanted it to be inclusive. So if anyone knows, Hillsborough Park, Penistone Road is running on the right-hand side of this map. So it's right next to the kind of a main corridor into Sheffield. And then we've kind of got the main track here. Hopefully you can all see my mouse. The main track in this sort of area next to the tennis courts, and then just up in this area we've actually put in all designs for potentially a little kind of a more entry level track, so you can kind of got a progression from an easier track to a more competent track. And on the left hand side where those kind of red lines are, and there's kind of what I call a bike gym. So it's a flat bit of ground where you can learn the fundamental movement skills that underpin a lot of the movement that you do actually on the track, and it's kind of key. So you've got a nice progression there, making it accessible to as many people as possible. Impact so far. So I think through this program, it's better connected the city through local networks. You know, it's had it's had a specific focus. The project had a focus. It's had some. There's been some investment already, and there's been a real desire to get this up and going quite quickly, or relatively quickly. So it's really pulled that city and those kind of local networks together. As I mentioned earlier, we had this kind of creation of a disability and inclusive cycling group. We've also been pulling together a volunteers group together, of which some people have come through the trees and want to volunteer at the club itself when it's created. And we've highlighted the potential impact from our community consultation of such a facility for Sheffield. What's next on the agenda? So I'd like to secure planning for the kind of final designs in the coming months, get procurement for the build, continue outreach once we're able to. Obviously with the current COVID-19 situation, that's kind of ceased, but we're doing things in the background there to help get things going again as soon as we're able to that kind of club development role, and then design and implement some form of research project which kind of measures that kind of impact or on users. So I haven't gone into this in too much detail, but some broad research questions and kind of methods we've been thinking about is questions around can participation in a BMX club benefit pupils or people's health and well-being, with a specific focus on children and young people, women and girls, and disability groups. So we'd like to explore the impact on people's well-being, beliefs, confidence, resilience, self-identity, and kind of so on. But importantly as well, find out what the key kind of mechanisms are to improving people's or to that impact, essentially, to that kind of health and well-being impact. So is it the social aspect? Is it the fact that it's very accessible? Is it the fact that it's a different offer than the traditional football, netball, basketball kind of offer? What are those key mechanisms which are helping to change people's behaviour for the positive? And then just thinking around some of those kind of methods, probably design something around a mixed method design where we're doing some qualitative interviews, focus groups. We're eliciting the kind of modal salient beliefs of the user groups and finding out what's really important, and then design some form of questionnaire that can help us to measure and track those beliefs and how they change throughout being involved in the program, drawing on theories such as self-determination theory and theory about behavior, that sort of thing, and then potentially use that kind of information, kind of feedback, and kind of those results to improve the intervention design, potentially using models such as COM-B. And this kind of logic model came up a while ago. It's probably a bit outdated now, but I just wanted to kind of highlight it as something that when I originally kind of sat down and this was potentially a thing, it's kind of encompasses a lot of my talk really now, that I've kind of been speaking about for like sort of last 10, 15 minutes now. There's a problem to solve, there's some necessary inputs, program of activities highlighted, there's some outputs and kind of outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. And just to discuss some of the wider impact, the dissemination of work, hoping to get some publications out of this as well, so we can start to build that knowledge base in these kind of non-traditional sports compared to more traditional sports, and highlighting the importance of these opportunities of high quality community assets as well. And then also in the future, potential for shaping Sheffield's physical infrastructure using key kind of contacts. So in summary, I highlighted where that initial kind of idea came from. I sought advice from partners, including the council and other groups, found out the feasibility of this idea, sought funding opportunities, pulled together a working group, created a proposal, submitted that, and then now, luckily, I'm currently kind of managing that project as we go ahead. So yeah, that's everything. Thank you very much for listening, and if anyone has any questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Gareth. Really interesting talk. So I can open up to the virtual floor for questions. Have we got any questions for Gareth at this point? Raise your hand if you can. There's quite a few people on, so I'll try and do my best to work out where we are. Can't see anything immediately, so I was just interested with. I remember one of your points on Access Sport. You mentioned that they were BMX is kind of one of their more successful funded activities, and I was just wondering whether that was because of whether I was just sort of in my own mind sort of comparing that to other forms of cycling, kind of road cycling, those types of modes of cycling. I was just wondering whether there was a factor of the BMX track being at a physical facility and actually people needing to come to those sites to use that track. I was just trying to wonder why the BMX is possibly one of the more sort of successful activities there. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I haven't actually asked that question to them before, but yeah, I mean, BMX inherently, Access Sport target children, young people specifically, and I think to that sort of user group, BMX, it's quite a cool kind of sport to kind of get involved in, and a lot of the outreach program that is involved through Access Sport, and they help set up in the different areas that they work in. So they're currently working in London and Bristol, and then they're developing some other initiatives elsewhere, including Sheffield, is around targeting those children who perhaps aren't already physically active as well. So I think once they've kind of got involved in that outreach, has started to build confidence in their cycling proficiency, and perhaps they've started to create those social networks, and they're kind of getting that, I call it in coaching, that kind of that yes factor. I think if you go through and you enjoy something, you get an immediate yes, and then, oh, I was quite good at that, or I've improved quite a lot of that. It kind of helps you feel quite good, improves that self-confidence, and it helps you you want to repeat that. So I think then that's kind of drawn people back time and time again. And yeah, it's just that kind of that fun and engagement kind of side of things as well. A lot of the literature points to one of the number one predictors of future behavior or motivation for behavior is around fun and enjoyment. And so if we can make an activity fun and engaging and enjoyable, they're likely to have a good experience. And then if they've had a good experience, they're likely to want to repeat that experience, and kind of so on. And also, one of the things I personally think is very good around such initiatives as this is that they are structured and unstructured. So you don't have to just turn up at a specific time. You can come along to a specific club event and learn with other peers to improve your skills and create those social bonds, but then you can also come back almost kind of whenever you want at your own will and kind of play on it as well. So compared to other sports, such as, you know, football and things where they're more of a team environment, it's perhaps more difficult that way. So that's a bit of a guess, but I'd imagine that goes a long way.
So thanks for that. Okay, I can see Nick's got his hand raised there. Nick?
Thanks very much for that, Gareth. So I got the video off because my internet is really dreadful today. We've talked about the programme before, and I think it's amazing. I can't wait for you to pull your finger out and get it built. But I suppose I've come from two things. One, I hadn't realised that you were doing this under your academic banner. I thought this was an A-line programme. So I think that's even more wonderful. But so I'm jumping in myself. I've had a bit of a thought for many years, which we call pump track physics. And that's how you're able to generate forward momentum without pedaling. You know, right. Just this distribution of weight. And part of that is around getting exactly the right shape of lump for you to propel over for your size of wheel and your body shape. Have you had any thoughts about what the ideal size shape of pump track elements might be for the different vehicles on there?
To be honest, no. That is not my area of expertise, and I'm very much a believer in call on the experts where the experts are kind of needed. And one of the positives that Access Sport, as well as my general knowledge in cycling, kind of, but what Access Sport kind of bring to the table is they have connections with a lot of facility designers and builders. And so they're kind of the experts in the area. So I personally haven't even asked that question, but that's not to say that we shouldn't ask that question. Perhaps once we've kind of nailed on the procurement and who's going to do the track build, that's something where we could put in contact with maybe with yourselves and them to find out if you can find out that sort of information. But no, that's not something I've thought about.
It's very much a pet project that we've been pulling over for many years. So I didn't mean to put you on the spot, you know, engineer versus psychologist. But yeah,
no, it's fine. I mean, if we can dovetail the two together and you can get something out of it too, then that's great.
Cheers. Okay.
Good stuff. Okay. Thanks very much, Gareth. I think just mindful of time, so we'll move on. But thank you very much for your talks. They're really insightful. So to get a good overview of what you're doing there with that project. So thank you.